My name is Jack Mayer. Wild pigs are opportunistic omnivores. Very simply, what that means is if it has a calorie in it and they can get their mouth around it, they will eat it. Today, I want to talk to you about a component of wild pig forage habitats, very simply feeding on garbage. I want to look at what the effects of letting wild pigs feed in a landfill is on that population, and the challenges that creates for resource managers that are trying to either manage or possibly even eliminate that wild pig population. I'd like to recognize my two co-presenters, Dr. John Kilgo and James Garabedian, both from the Southern Research Station of the U.S. Forest Service. Again, being opportunistic omnivores, wild pigs will readily feed on garbage. This includes edible garbage, also includes things like diapers, paper, plastic, polyethylene bags, and rubber bands, but today we're going to focus on edible garbage. This has been documented in a number of locations, varying from individual garbage cans and dumpsters up to large dumps and large landfills. Large multi-county or regional municipal sanitary waste landfills like the Guadalupe landfill outside of San Jose, California, or the Seminole County landfill outside of Orlando, Florida, constitute attractive forage resources for large numbers of wild pigs. At the Seminole County landfill several years ago, they reported that they had between 2,000 and 3,000 wild pigs that were found in and around the landfill foraging there on the garbage. Such landfills provide year-round anthropogenic sources of potentially high-quality forage for these animals. In the mid-1990s, the Three Rivers Solid Waste Authority signed a contract with the U.S. Department of Energy to construct and operate a 9-county regional RCRA Subtitle D sanitary waste landfill on the Savannah River site in western South Carolina. 1998, that landfill went operational. Landfill isn't fenced, and it's, if you can see it here on this figure, the landfill is right there, surrounded by what I'm going to tell you now is Wildlife Compartment 20 in that white area. Wild pigs began foraging in the Three Rivers landfill in 2001, and by 2009, there were over 100 pigs a night that were frequently observed foraging in the landfill. The image down here in the lower right-hand corner is a map showing GPS locations of mature sows with their sounders. The individual colors denote individual sounders. So this is the border of the landfill. These are the waste disposal cells, and these are the pigs that were foraging in the waste disposal cells. And this extensive use of the landfill by wild pigs as a forage resource has continued up through the present. So with this species, the quality of forage resources can affect physical growth, it can affect reproductive output, and it can affect population biology parameters. In this study, we wanted to look at those pigs foraging in the landfill and see how this affected their body mass, basically their weight, the fetal litter size, population parameters. We had a density surrogate I'll talk about in a minute, but also the sex ratio and age structure of the population of the animals in that area using the landfill. We also wanted to look at wild pig vehicle collisions, or WPVCs, around the landfill. Now, it may be intuitive, but it's never been studied, never been documented to date, but we are hypothesizing that all of these parameters would increase for those pigs found around the landfill. So we mined data out of the SRS deer hunt database and out of the databases from various control programs on the site that are used to manage our wild pigs. And for each pig, the data included the location of harvest, the date of the removal, the total body mass, the sex of the animal, the age class, one of 5 age classes that we use here on site, and for pregnant females, the fetal litter count. For density, several studies have showed that the number of animals, of wild pigs harvested in an area is significantly correlated with the density of wild pigs in that area. So we used as a density surrogate the number of wild pigs removed per square kilometer. We also compiled the wild pig vehicle collisions from records that were maintained by the site's law enforcement agencies and also some of the Forest Service contractors. We used the before-after control impact analytical design, or BACI design. The before period would be 1980 through 2000. The after period would be starting in 2001 when pigs started foraging in the landfill through 2019. The control area would be all the other wildlife compartments on the SRS. The impact area would be wildlife compartment 20 that I showed you, that white area that surrounds the landfill. We used mixed effects ANOVAs separately to test the differences in means between the treatment areas, control and impact, and between the time periods before and after. The removal data set comparing the time periods for each treatment area looked at the proportions of total pigs removed, the proportions of males and females removed, and the proportions of specific age classes removed. For the collision data set, we only tested data during the after landfill time period because there were no vehicle collisions adjacent to the landfill during the before period. We looked at differences in sex and age class around in the impact area versus the control area. And we also looked at monthly and seasonal differences in the impact area versus the control area. The data that we analyzed for body mass data included just over 11,000 wild pigs. For the fetal data, we had fetal litter counts from almost 800 pregnant sows. The removal data that we didn't have body mass data for the most part, included almost 24,000 wild pigs. And for the vehicle collisions, we had almost 500 wild pigs that were involved in collisions around the landfill and also on the site. Getting into the results, the body mass data for those pigs that were in the impact area over here, there was a significant increase in body mass in the before to after time periods. We also saw an increase in the control area, but not as large as we saw in the impact area. For the fetal litter data, the mean litter size was significantly larger in the after period for the impact area. Again, you can see that over here, but not in the control area. And in the impact area, the mean fetal litter size went from 5.9 up to 7.1 in the area around the landfill. As far as the removal data, looking at the impact area in the before and after, we saw an increase of almost 300% between the two time periods in the impact area. Whereas the rest of the site, we did see an increase in the density surrogate, but it was only 53%, not near as large. And in comparing the control with the impact area, there were no sex or age class differences. For the wild pig vehicle collision data, the first wild pig vehicle collision occurred adjacent to the landfill in 2003. And if you look at this top figure from 1980 to 1999, there were wild pigs in this area at that time. However, we saw no vehicle collisions whatsoever in the two roads bordering the landfill. Again, that started in 2003. And those collisions increased through time. You can see this in the figures here after the landfill went operational. The sex ratio and age classes of the pigs involved in these vehicle collisions did not differ between the impact or control areas. So we're basically sampling the same sex and age structure of pigs in these collisions. The times of the collisions around the landfill were an hour, either before or after sunrise or before or after sunset. And we did not see any clear monthly or seasonal differences in these collisions. So our findings concur with previous work on various wildlife species that are foraging in landfills, in that we saw increases in mean body mass, increases in reproductive output, increases in population density, and also changes in behavioral patterns, in our case, associated with the vehicle collisions. In wild pigs, increased body mass in sexually mature females is correlated with increased litter size, which is something that we saw in our data set. This increased recruitment would represent a significant challenge to management efforts that are trying to either control or possibly even eradicate a wild pig population foraging in the landfill. We did a little bit of modeling, and you're looking at basically a 1.2 piglet increase in the fetal litter size. So if you model that over a 10-year period, where you have a population has a mean fetal litter size of 5.9 versus a mean fetal litter size of 7.1, the population with the mean fetal litter size of 7.1, which is what we saw around the landfill, will actually double in a 10-year period. So this is something that would have would make a significant difference in trying to control these animals. In addition, that larger body size that we saw represents an increased safety risk with respect to vehicle collisions. Larger pigs end up having more serious consequences in these vehicle collisions. So you might think that, okay, so the vehicle collisions increased around the landfill. However, concurrently, the overall SRS traffic volume decreased from the 1980s through 2019. So it wasn't that we saw an increase in traffic that caused that increase. In addition, the landfill traffic, the garbage trucks pulling into the landfill, that occurred during daylight hours when the landfill was operational, which is not when the wild pig vehicle collisions around the landfill occurred. Wild pigs have not been observed in the waste disposal cells during daylight hours, probably because of the presence of humans there. The animals involved in these accidents around sunrise, we think because they were there foraging at night around sunrise, we assumed they were leaving the landfill, and around sunset, we would assume they would be entering the facility. And in fact, our GPS data does corroborate these assumptions. In addition, allowing wild pigs to forage on garbage in the landfill also creates several operational problems for that facility. Wild pigs going in there, rooting up the garbage, uncovers and scatters the edible waste, making it more available for other scavengers like seagulls and vultures and coyotes, which then further scatter the waste around the landfill waste disposal area. Rooting on the sides or slopes of landfill closure caps or covers can also lead to erosion and slumping. This lower image is a landfill in Louisiana. It saw the pig rooting here, and this has caused erosion and slumping down on the lower part of the closure cap. So again, allowing wild pigs access to a landfill like this causes additional problems for the operator having to go in and clean up this dispersed and unearthed food waste, as well as having to repair damage to the landfill cap. Something we really didn't specifically talk about in our study, but is still part of this story, is the potential disease and pathogen transmission associated with wild pigs foraging in landfills. African swine fever virus is currently spreading across Eurasia. Now it's made it all the way to the west, made it all the way over to Belgium, and in the east to the Korean Peninsula, and last year down into the Philippines. There are several credible scenarios that exist for the introduction of African swine fever into the United States. And based on several studies over in Eurasia, the transmission of African swine fever across Eurasia, several scenarios have involved wild boar foraging in landfills. So what you have is a situation where you have a domestic swine herd that is contaminated for African swine fever, unbeknownst to the owner. They then produce pork products like sausage, which is sold and for whatever reason then gets disposed of in a landfill, gets thrown away. They've got wild boar, like our landfills here, they don't fence their landfills. And wild boar go in and forage in the landfills and then eat those contaminated pork products. They become infected with the virus and they then transmit it to yet another domestic swine herd. And this circular scenario is pretty much how African swine fever has made its way east and west across Eurasia. If African swine fever were to enter the US, and get into the wild pig population, it would go across the country like wildfire. We don't have a very good history in being able to deal with pathogen outbreaks in our wild pig populations. Here in the US, it would impact the US pork industry and would literally cost hundreds of billions of dollars to those pork producers, with losses in headcount, productivity, and sales. So the effect of allowing wild pigs to forage in landfills can present very unique challenges to the resource managers trying to control the animals in and around those facilities. These include things like public safety with respect to the vehicle collisions. There are challenges with population control because you've got larger animals that are cranking out more babies. And there's also that disease transmission aspect that is going to become very important if African swine fever gets over into this country. You can try lethal removal to eliminate the problem around these landfills. However, that's been tried at the Three Rivers landfill. It's also been tried at the Seminole County landfill down in Florida, where they've removed over the years between 1,000 and 2,000 wild pigs a year, and they're still covered up with wild pigs down there. One solution might simply be to prevent pigs from accessing the landfill waste disposal cells by putting up a pig-proof fence. This is something that can be very expensive, and it's going to require maintenance over time to make it effective. However, I don't know of any landfills in this country that are fenced right now with pig-proof fencing. They could also go in and place a deeper cover fill over the waste disposal cells on a daily basis. They can use reusable tarps or other durable coverings or coatings to prevent access to the wild pigs from getting at the edible food waste. However, to my knowledge, no landfills are doing this at this time. So this is something that's an ongoing problem, something we need to look at more. And it's something that, again, if African swine fever gets into this country, is going to become a very important component of the wild pig problem. So with that, I appreciate your attention. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have. You can contact me at the email address below, or the phone number, or tune into our Q&A session here at the conference. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your attention.